Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prosper Sustainably's webinar on developing and implementing a strategic plan. I'm Josh Simmons. I am a collaborative strategist, consultant, and attorney with Prosper Sustainably. And for those of you who are not aware of the date, it is July 9th. I want to give you a little background on myself to introduce myself. So I'm the founding president of Prosper Sustainably, a consulting firm and other legal services firm that I started a little over a year ago. And Prosper Sustainably assists individuals, organizations, and communities in clarifying, pursuing, fulfilling their unique potential through various consulting and legal services. Prior to founding Prosper Sustainably, I was the director of the Santa Ynez Chumash Environmental Office. I am based out of Santa Barbara County. I do work all over the country, but I do live in Santa Barbara County. I'm actually in the process of moving from Solvang to Carpinteria. While working for the Chumash Environmental Office, I was able to transform that department into one of the leading tribal environmental agencies in the nation. Had a lot of success in terms of pursuing and obtaining grant funding, and was able to grow the program from about 2 to over 20 programs and initiatives, and up to 15 staff members at one point. I also do training and instructing and lecture at UCSB and for other organizations, so there are several acronyms down below. You may or may not recognize some of them. In terms of strategic planning, I want to share some of my background with that. It's something for me, it's been kind of a lifelong pursuit. I think it's just kind of embedded in my DNA, but I've had more opportunity to apply it more recently with a variety of organizations. So currently I'm in the process of developing a strategic plan and work plan with the Paula Band of Mission Indians Environmental Department and also the La Jolla Band of Luis Sueño Indians Environmental Protection Office. Last fall I worked with the Rincon tribe in developing their strategic work plan. Last February I helped Santa Barbara Channel Keeper in facilitating their strategic planning retreat. I was on the board, and that was actually one of the last things I did while on the board. I did a lot of strategic planning type activities while working with the Chumash Environmental Office to help establish and pursue our mission, vision, and goals. And strategic planning is something that I apply in my own life. So the concepts that I'm going to discuss during this webinar, I believe that apply to an organization also apply to an individual and how they pursue their lives both personally and professionally. And I think the ultimate goal is to actually eliminate the barrier between those personal and professional pursuits. And I think personal strategic planning is the way to get there. So before I get into the webinar objectives, I just want to let everybody know that there's going to be a survey at the conclusion of the webinar. I value and welcome your feedback. I want to be able to improve upon my presentations and ask a variety of questions that will help me in better serving people and just better providing future trainings and webinars. Yeah, I mentioned this before, but if you have any questions or any issues, you can type them in the lower left hand portion of the screen. I'm doing my best to monitor those. I'm likely going to answer any questions at the end, but if something pops up that I think is timely, I may answer it then. So, and I'll go back through and try to scroll through to make sure that I address all of the questions. I also want to let people know, good question, Terry. I am going to make the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, a video recording of this presentation and the resources that I mentioned described here. I'm going to make them available on my website. It may actually be about a week and a half before I can get them up. After this webinar, things start to get pretty busy for a little while, but I'm going to upload the recording to YouTube and upload those all to my website. And anybody who registered for this webinar is on my email list and will receive an email notification of when those are posted with the link. So, don't worry about having to take too diligent a note. You can come back to this later on, and I hope that these resources end up assisting your organization for some time to come. In case this does happen occasionally, if I do have technical difficulties and get disconnected for some reason, again, knock on wood, stay on. It just means that maybe for some reason I got dropped. The webinar will remain going, and I just need to reconnect. So if you for some reason can't hear me, if you can't hear me, let me know through the chat window, and I'll be able to read your comments. But if for some reason I disappear for a moment, I should be back on. I have not had. I've only had that happen one time. And one thing I want to say too is that, I am able to offer this as a free webinar because any meeting does that through the support of ads. So you'll have some ads pop up on the side of your screen. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to offer these for free if I did not utilize this service. So I'm actually pretty thankful that any meeting offers this. And I've actually just figured out the technology now where I can show the whole presentation slides without having any issues with ads and things overlapping it. So you should all be able to see the full screen. And lastly, I want to just remind people that in terms of audio, if the audio you're hearing, if it's not good, then try switching. If you're listening through your computer, try switching to your phone. And if you're listening to your phone, try switching to your computer. If you can't resolve it and it's just still bad, it's usually associated with your internet connection, then this will be fully recorded. You'll be able to hear it loud and clear on YouTube when I post it. All right, so now we can dive back into the presentation. I'm very passionate about strategic planning, both on an organizational and a personal level. Strategic planning allows an organization to clarify its purpose and highest goals. If done well, it will help an organization maintain alignment with that highest purpose and those goals, and optimize resources in pursuing those along the way. Strategic planning is one of the most important and powerful processes and documents and systems that should be central to how any organization operates. It should be the focal point of major decision-making processes, and everything should flow down from a strategic plan. Actually, in preparation for this webinar, I looked up some statistics on strategic planning. I'm going to very generalize and summarize them. I'm actually going to make a document available for when I did my some web research on strategic planning. I just cut and paste the links into a document, so I figured I could share those with you. I'll include the one statistics document that I found as well. The almost 100% of typical workforce doesn't understand the organization's strategy. The stat here I have has 95%. So I'm going to use just kind of, like I said, just general majority, vast majority, rather than perfect numbers, because I'm a little suspect of exact statistics as it is anyways. But in terms of that, most executive teams spend probably less than an hour a month discussing strategy. The vast majority of companies with a strategic plan don't actually execute their strategic plan. Most organizations don't utilize a strategic plan when they're budgeting and other processes. So, there's a major gap there. But the thing is that most organizations, in general, I believe either don't do strategic planning or don't do it effectively. And if this is your organization, you are not alone. And instead of seeing this as a problem, you have an opportunity in front of you. You may be an organization that's doing well right now without effective strategic plans or strategic planning processes. And when I say strategic planning, I mean strategic plan development and management, or strategic plan development and implementation. So if you're doing well, you have an opportunity to do that much better. If you're struggling or you see room to improve, I believe that a strategic plan will allow you to get there. During this webinar, I'm going to provide an overview and as I just discussed, the importance of strategic planning and management, and I will come back to that throughout this webinar. I'm trying to cram a lot of information in a short period of time. I'm trying to keep this webinar to an hour. I could probably easily do a 3-day to a week-long training on strategic planning. But I want to get a lot of content, and there's a lot of content in these slides too. So I'm going to do my best to cover it all, but I'm also going to try to stay on track with time. So I'm also going to go through the process of strategic plan development. And this is the strategic plan is your mission, vision, values, your goals, and your SWOT analysis. It also includes a strategic work plan, which is going to incorporate the objectives, performance metrics, and other information that flows down from that overarching, mainly linked with the goals. I'm going to describe strategies and techniques for doing strategic plan implementation and considerations. I'm going to discuss approaches, tools, and resources, and these are things that I'm going to share through my website. I'm also going to share or describe why and how to develop a living strategic plan. And really, I'm going to attempt to justify doing ongoing strategic planning and management and continuing with those efforts. And another thing I'm going to talk about is the human element in strategic planning and management. So you don't want to look at your strategic plan, its objectives and its goals as things in isolation. I mean, all this process involves humans, and that you need to integrate your people into these processes. So I'll emphasize that from the beginning, even though I'm not going to be getting to that toward the end, is if you want your strategic plan development and management implementation to be effective, it needs to involve the people who are involved in your organization. And as much as possible in a way that makes sense and efficient and effective. I want to share 3 stories, metaphorical stories about organizational approaches to strategic planning or lack thereof. Each main character in each of these 3 stories represents an organization and their approach. And in listening to these stories, I want you to consider what represents your organization right now, and what do you want to represent your organization. These are simplifications. They're meant to bring a little humor to this. I enjoyed creating these graphics. As those who participated in my webinars in the past, they've been very, very text heavy, and I've enjoyed kind of utilizing some more of PowerPoint's functions. So story number 1, the main character is Alice, and this is taken from Alice in Wonderland. So some of you may know where I'm going with this already, but I have a bit of a twist to it. So Alice has a good heart, as you can see in the middle of her body right there. She possesses strong values, but she's struggling in some other ways right now. Alice's new friend, the cat. The cat is really anyone examining an organization. So we'll call the cat the examiner, somebody from an outside perspective or even an inside perspective who's looking at the organization and trying to help the organization. So Alice asks the cat, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" And the cat responds, "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to." I don't much care where." And the cat responds to that, "Then it doesn't matter which way you go." So that is a direct quote from Alice in Wonderland. And in this case, even though Alice has strong values, she doesn't know where she's going. She lacks a mission and vision. So you got to think, you probably don't want this to represent your organization. You want to know where your organization is going. Story number 2, the main character is the gingerbread man. This is just, and I pulled the gingerbread man as one of the images on the internet. This may or may not be the gingerbread man from Shrek. But anyways, the main point is this gingerbread man represents a different type of organization. This organization does know where it wants to go. And here's its new friend, the cat. And the cat asks the gingerbread man, "I've seen you drive by 5 times. Do you want directions?" And gingerbread man responds, "Nah, I'm pretty sure I know where it's at." "You sure? I know this place pretty well." "Nah, this looks familiar. I think it's just a few more blocks. I'll get there." So this gingerbread man lacks a strategy or plan or tools to get to where he knows he wants to go. Again, you probably don't want this to represent your organization in the long run. The great thing is in both of these situations is these are evolving things. Even when you do know where you want to go, it's still going to be an evolving thing as well. So even if you are this guy right now, you have the opportunity to improve. And the first thing is being aware of it and then taking the steps to improve. So a third situation, the main character is an enlightened yet practical being. This being, he or she knows where he or she wants to go. So let's say it's a she in this case. She has a mission and vision. That mission and vision is demonstrated by this map. So that X is where she wants to go. The thing about the map, though, is as circumstances change, the map may no longer reflect reality. The map looks a little bit old, probably found in, it's something that was developed, or the map was written a long time ago. It looks like. So, these mountains, they may not be there. I mean, they could have been strip mined. Those things could be gone. This wetlands, or this lake right here, that could be filled in now, and that could be a condominium complex. So, as this enlightened being is trying to get to her destination, she may no longer be able to recognize how to get there. So this is an enlightened yet practical being because she has a GPS. So in this GPS, you can see really her mission, vision, and values are guide, pray, and serve. So this enlightened being knows where she's going, knows her purpose, and has an adaptable tool or strategic plan that accounts for changing circumstances and ultimately can get there. So, as I mentioned, good news is regardless of where you're at right now, you have the ability to identify and or change your direction and develop the tools to get you towards your goals. So this is ultimately the type of organization and position you would hopefully want to be in. All right, so an overview of mission, vision, and values. Your mission is your what and how. It may also include your who and where. And these terms that I'm saying can have different definitions. They can be described differently. I think that my definition gets at the main concept, the main essence of what it is. So just kind of to bear in mind, I don't think there's really any right way or wrong way to describe these things. Except in terms of what's effective and what's not effective. So right or wrong is effective and not effective. So purpose, this is the purpose of the organization, and it's something that you want to be clear and concise. An effective mission statement will guide the decisions about the organization's priorities, its activities, the roles within and the responsibilities within the organization, and other things. But it may attempt to do so, but you don't want to have something that's so unwieldy. It really, your mission statement needs to guide the people who are part of the organization. It doesn't so much matter if anybody can read it and know exactly what's going on, so long as the people who are involved, it guides them. Your vision statement, on the other hand, is the ultimate state of success. It's probably the why that's driving you to do what you're doing. Another way to state this is if your organization is completely successful, how do you imagine it being in the world or impacting the world in X number of years? So depending on the lifespan of your organization, that could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. Establishing world peace is a vision, and that's not really a mission. That's an ultimate state of success. So if you are an organization that does, let's say, negotiation, mediation, that could be your vision, world peace. That is an example of a vision. Another way to describe a vision is an opportunity to begin with the end in mind. And you may know that from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That is the second habit, but that is having a vision is keeping the end in mind. An organization's values are the beliefs that guide the behavior of the people who are within and interact with the organization, or who are part of the organization. Another way of stating that is how things are done around here. Your values guide your actions, your behaviors, your communications. They can be principles, they can be principle-based. It's best if these describe the existing values of the organization. You can create a list of aspirational values. The thing, though, is you don't want to create merely a list of aspirational values. there needs to be a connection between your values and what's actually going on within an organization. And your organization can evolve to higher values, but your values are your culture, and culture can take a lot of effort and time to change. That can be done through new employees, new personnel, can be done through policies and systems, but it really, it's the organization's culture. And if your values do not reflect the actual organizational culture, then it's going to actually hurt your organization. It could actually be counterproductive because people are going to say, "Oh well, my organization believes in its employees, or says it believes in its employees and developing their employees to be the best people they can be, and assisting them in their professional development." But that's not the actual case. They don't provide any of those opportunities, and that actually can hurt your culture. It can lead to a worse culture. So describe. You want to identify and describe your existing values, the good ones, and even perhaps the bad ones. And then you can develop aspirational values, but you're not, just because you list them as values doesn't mean that's who you are and how you're operating. Developing the organization's mission, vision, and values is an ongoing and evolving process. It may and it should take time. It's not something that I believe that you can just, if you don't have a mission, vision, and values, that you can just go to a retreat and then get these things all clarified. It takes, if you're talking about your overall highest purpose, then that takes time. I think you can get some of the essence and start to develop the right direction and develop drafts pretty quickly. And those drafts can guide you, but then as you are utilizing them to guide you, you get better insights to what's working, what's not, and what language you feel is inspirational and what's not. So mission, vision, and values can be inspirational. They don't necessarily have to be, but it is more beneficial if they are something that both inspires and motivates the people who are within the organization, who interact with the organization. And they can be updated and modified over time. And I believe that ultimately, especially in terms of a mission and vision, it probably is going to come to a point where and this could be something over a couple of years, where you nail it, like it. You've recrafted it and you're like, that's it. This is probably not going to change. I think it's good to still be open to changing it, still good to review and reflect upon it and consider revising each year, but I think at some point you'll nail it. And so long as your organization has its own internal organization is going in a concerted direction. If your organization is in alignment with that mission, then that will always be appropriate. So one example of something that takes a long time. So when I was with the Chumash Environmental Office, it took probably about 2 to 3 years to develop the mission statement. There was an initial mission statement, and we ended up completely recrafting it. Excuse me. That process of recrafting that original mission statement took about 2 to 3 years. And the mission statement of the Chumash Environmental Office is to responsibly manage natural resources for sustained social, cultural, spiritual, and economic prosperity. That does a good job of did a good job of guiding us in our decision-making process, and still does. I believe that it's an amazing office. They're doing incredible things, and it was an honor to be a part of it. And I'm glad to see I have some great people who are carrying that forward. In terms of considering your mission, you want to ask, does the mission and vision statements guide the major decisions and direction of the organization? So does that mission statement that I just stated guide the decision-making processes of the Chumash Environmental Office? So in considering that, we're actually trying to say, in this goal of managing natural resources, whether it's water quality, waste management, renewable energy, is that somehow creating sustained social, cultural, spiritual, and or economic prosperity? Or is it counter to any of those things? Is it actually decreasing any of those? And if it's decreasing some of those things, then we have to reflect upon, if we're developing a new goal or objective, whether it's appropriate to pursue. On the flip side of that is, if your organization has a whole bunch of objectives and things you want to pursue, and they don't seem to be in alignment with your mission, vision, and values, then so one option is to change one option is to change your objectives to align with the mission, vision, and values. The other option is to change your mission, vision, and values to align with the objectives and then to refine those objectives so that they're both in alignment. And you want to make sure these things are being observed, modeled, and perhaps even enforced. So, your values, are those being enforced by the people within the organization? And that can be done through policies and procedures, which I don't think is as effective. But, if you start seeing that there's peer pressure to act a certain way that's better for the organization, so the peers, so it's not coming from top down, it's actually coming from maybe the bottom to the top or even parallel, then that's something that that your values are in alignment with what your organizational culture actually is. I want to share a few examples of some mission statements and then one that's not a mission statement. So United Way, I've always, I know United Way does a lot of good in the community. I'm not entirely sure exactly, I know I've seen what they do, but I was always kind of curious as what their mission actually was. And as I can see, it's still kind of vague. It's a good mission statement. They improve the lives of people. They improve lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities around the world to advance the common good. Ultimately, there's things about this I like. There's things about it I don't like. In order to determine whether it's an effective mission statement, I would want to see the organization, see how they operate, see how they utilize their mission in terms of their decision-making processes. There can be layers of missions, vision, and values, or actually layers of strategic plans. I'm going to get more to that in a moment, but in this case, so the United Way has a whole bunch of different branches throughout the country that have their own mission, vision, and values, and this is Dayton areas one. And sometimes they're a little more specific, but I actually looked at several different ones, and they're completely different. They're not completely different. They're along the same lines. They all align with the overarching organization's mission, vision, and values. They're extensions of it, but they word it in their own unique ways. An example of a government mission statement that I liked was Alameda County's in California. And the mission of Alameda County is to enrich the lives of its residents through visionary policies and accessible, responsive, and effective services. That is, I believe, very clear and perhaps even powerful. And I like their vision just as much. They want to be recognized as one of the best counties in which to live, work, and do business. So that is aspirational. That is how they see themselves in how many ever years. That's their ultimate goal. If they're as successful, if they're 100% successful in everything they do, then they're accomplishing their vision. So that's a good way to think about your vision. If you're 100% successful in doing what you're trying to do, what are you, or what has happened in the world? And also in terms of vision too, your vision can be what happens, what your organization ends up, what's the ultimate state of your organization, or what's the ultimate change in the world. So it can be one or both of those. It really depends on what works for you. Another good mission statement I think is Google's mission statement, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. I believe that Google does a good job of doing that. I believe they're fulfilling their mission. It's clear to me as an outsider, and I believe it does guide what they do. I was reading one article on strategic planning. It's actually on the resources list. It was a fairly good article. There was one thing I didn't like about it. It stated that Nike's mission was to just do it. And it said that was a good mission statement. It said it was powerful, and my perspective is I actually don't agree. I believe that that's a slogan. I don't think that really describes Nike's purpose. You can have a purpose. You can have a purpose that reflects your. You can have a purpose that is the same thing as your slogan, but in that case, I believe it is just a slogan. So Prosper Sustainably's mission is to help individuals, organizations, communities clarify, pursue, and fulfill their unique potential. This is very much in alignment with my own personal mission, and then the vision. So the mission feels very clear to me. I actually feel like that's something where I'm like I've nailed that. The vision, I think, is still something that's underway. What I have so far is widespread empowerment, harmony, and genuineness throughout the world as a result of the majority of individuals, organizations, and communities taking meaningful steps toward fulfilling their unique potential. I feel like that needs work. It's a little bit of a mouthful. That does reflect what Prosper Sustainably does, and it reflects who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish in this world. But I feel like it could be stated perhaps better. And what's great is this, these and should be evolving over time. So one question I just saw was, can you have one vision statement, or is it best to narrow to one? Uh, I don't think that there's necessarily a right answer to that. Perhaps that's the attorney in me coming out, but so my answer is there is an answer to that question, and that is it depends on your circumstances and what's effective. If you The benefit of having just one statement is it's clearer to everybody. It's easier to communicate. If you end up having multiple statements for your mission and vision, I think that it's like the word priority. I recently learned that the word priority got completely and utterly mixed up in our language. Priority is supposed to be one thing, the highest purpose. But now we have priorities, and we could have a list of priorities that are 10 long. So if you have 10 priorities, then what you don't really have a priority. You just have 10 important things. And in achieving your highest priority, well, if you're pursuing 10, you're dividing your resources. So I actually, I guess, would advocate one mission and vision statement, but ultimately, if you have multiple statements for either of those, and they're effective for guiding your organization, then that do what works, do what is effective in practice, and be open to changing over time. You can try just one statement and see how it works. If you find that there's some reason you need more, then try adding some more to that. So the SWOT analysis is another component of the strategic plan development process. Most of you probably, or many of you probably have heard of SWOT. And I'm going to briefly go through what this means. So you first want to analyze, or not first, I mean, you're analyzing all four of these, but you want to analyze your strengths. So what does your organization do well? What advantage does it have? And this advantage could be in context of what it does well relative to other similar organizations, what it does well within the community that nobody else is doing well, but what does your organization do well, and how do you want to leverage what it does well or build upon that? What are the organization's weaknesses? Where can it perhaps improve? Although, identifying weaknesses and analyzing them doesn't necessarily mean you need to improve, because that may not be an effective strategy. Identifying and being aware of them is important. And then from there, you can decide whether you need to improve it or where you just need to account for it. So you may actually focus on your strengths instead of your weaknesses. If you start focusing on too many weaknesses, then you may actually spread yourself too thin. You may take away from your strengths, your overall purpose, and what you're trying to accomplish. So the first two, the strengths and weaknesses, are more internal to the organization. The next two, the opportunities and threats, are external. So the opportunities are those positive circumstances surrounding the organization. They can be what's happening in the environment, what are the trends going on out there. It could be regulatory. The opportunities and threats are essentially the same types of things. It's just whether they're positive or negative. A regulation could benefit your organization, or it could restrict your organization in some way. If you're a regulatory law firm, like, new regulations could actually be good for your law firm. They could actually, and they could help you gain more work. They could help you fulfill your mission and vision. If you're a regulated entity, a new law comes out that can restrict some of what you have to do, what you have to handle. But those can be, those circumstances can be political, they can be economic. So there's a variety of things. In terms of your SWOT analysis, this really informs the other elements of the strategic planning and management. So you can look at the SWOT analysis. It can, to a limited extent, probably inform your mission and vision, your goals we're going to talk about, and then your objectives and strategies. From there, this is how you're going to craft those to address those strengths, those gaps, and this is something that I believe should be done at least annually. And you can do it overall for your organization, but you also can do it for each division within the organization or each strategic planning component. So if you have a department, then and your department has 10 different programs, you could run a separate SWOT analysis for each different program. I'm going to get, more on how to kind of possibly organize your strategic plan in a moment. So next I want to talk about goals and program areas. Your overall goals. So before getting into goals, the overall goals, I wanted to kind of just describe what I mean by goals. Goals and objectives are used differently by different people. So I'm just going to explain how I'm using them, how I use them in general, and how I'm using them in this presentation. So your goals are the highest things you're seeking to achieve. They're more specific than your mission and vision. They can be time based, but they don't necessarily have to be. They may or may not be achievable within your strategic plan time frame. And we'll talk about some possible time frames for a strategic plan in a moment. So some examples of your overall goals are going to be the ones that guide your organization as a whole. Some examples of that could be decrease or eliminate the number of decrease homelessness in a county. That's if you're decreasing it and you're trying to hit a certain metric, then perhaps it's something you can accomplish within a specified time frame. If you're trying to eliminate it, that may be something you never can actually accomplish, but it's something you always want to work toward. So another goal could be increasing your overall business profitability. That could be somewhat vague. You may want to be more specific than that. If you're a business, you may want to go public. You may want to achieve $25 per share. If you're an environmental organization that does a lot of different things in different areas, so air, water, waste, climate change, an overall goal might be to decrease or eliminate environmental impacts from human activities. Again, decrease could be associated with a specific metric. Eliminate means, that's ultimately your goal is to eliminate environmental impacts. You're probably never going to accomplish it, but it's something you always want to strive to do. And, some of those things can be aligned. All of those should be aligned with your mission and vision. Some, depending, could actually be your mission or vision and be at a higher level rather than at the goal level. The levels of specificity and measurements for these goals are going to vary from organization to organization depending on your circumstances, and that's something that you're going to identify through the process. Objectives, which I'm going to come back to later on in some later slides, are typically associated with one or more goals. You may have heard of the SMART acronym that people associate it with either goals or objectives. I'm actually, in this case, associating it more with objectives. So objectives in this case are going to be specific. They're going to be measurable, so you can quantify achieving it. Achievable, they're relevant, typically relevant to a particular goal, and they're going to be time-based. An objective is usually associated with one or more goals, and it may involve a series of objectives. So, what are you going to achieve? If your goal is to eliminate homelessness, what are the series of objectives you're going to do over what period of time to accomplish that? And if you're accomplishing your objectives, you are making progress toward accomplishing the goal. Another part of the strategic plan development process, and a very important part, is defining your program areas. And so I keep saying program areas. This is an interchangeable term again. There really is, I couldn't think of a better term that describes all of these things more effectively. So in this case, it could be your business functional or operational units. It could be your divisions, your departments, or just areas of focus within your organization. And also, when I say organization, that can be a business, it can be a government, it can be a nonprofit, it can be a tribal community. I mean, it can be a community. An organization can already be the division or department within that community. So, these same things they don't apply just to the overarching organization. They apply to the departments within the organization. So you can engage in your own strategic planning process for your own sub-entity of a larger entity. So when you're defining your program areas, you want to cover all aspects of an organization, including even the administrative type activities. So in doing your strategic planning, especially in developing your strategic work plan, which I'm going to describe more in a few minutes, is you're going to want to cover everything that your organization does so you can account for everything. Because if you don't account for everything, then you're going to have gaps. So if you did your strategic plan, you just focused on your program areas, but you didn't focus on administrative or financial activities, well, those things require resources. They require personnel, and they actually support those other areas. They support those other goals. If you're not accounting for them, then you're going to hinder yourself in effectively allocating resources and planning to move all those things forward. So some examples of program areas in a nonprofit organization you could have a development as a program area. In either in any type of organization, you probably could have marketing. Outreach is another one that's kind of related to marketing. That also could involve community education. Financial management can be a program area. If you're in a environmental organization that does a wide spectrum of things, solid waste management. If you're an if you're a waste management organization, then your program areas would be subdivided below that. So you would then probably maybe have like composting could be a program area, hazardous waste could be a program area, education outreach could be a program area. So you have to adapt these things based on your circumstances. This is a process of actually identifying and organizing these things in an effective manner. So corporate social responsibility, employee development are some other examples, and the list could go on and on. And then you can have overall organizational goals that guide your organization as a whole, and then you also can have program area goals that are going to guide each program under that overarching scope of the organization. You don't have to have separate overall and program area goals. It may make more sense. You may have your higher goals might be your overall goals. And then just your other goals are a little more specific. If you have other goals too, let's say you have a goal that just doesn't fit neatly into one category, it crosses over all of them. At that point, you may want to you either can list it under all those program areas, or you can raise it up to be an overall goal. So this is more of an art than a science. There's a science to this process, but there's definitely some finesse that's involved. And so like a program area goal could be under development, could be raise $1 million annually. So that's an example of a more specific program area goal, which isn't necessarily aligned. If your organization is focused on social justice, your more implementation specific program areas is not necessarily. We'll be concerned with that because obviously they're getting funding from it and there's overlap, but that's not going to be driving that particular. The people out in the field, the social workers, aren't going to be driven by raising $1 million. That should not be their goal within what they're doing on a daily basis. So I mentioned the strategic work plan, and at first I want to describe a strategic work plan by distinguishing it from the overarching strategic plan. So the overarching strategic plan is going to provide the overall direction and guide the decision making of the organization. And there's more to it than that. As you'll see throughout this presentation. It also can be utilized to evaluate issues, opportunities, needs, and objectives. So as these things arise, you evaluate them in context of your mission, vision, values, and goals. A strategic work plan, on the other hand, is more of a blueprint for implementing the strategic plan. So how are you actually going to accomplish those goals that you've set forth? It'll give you the specific direction and guidance. I believe it's best to organize your strategic work plan by program area. It establishes the major objectives within specific time frames. So I already mentioned, those objectives are the major steps toward accomplishing a goal or a series or multiple goals. A strategic work plan can also allow you to track and measure progress, performance, and achievements. It'll help you understand your resources, understand it and allocate. So that might be your funding resources, your employees, could be equipment, but it's good to understand what you have at your disposal and what you need and how to allocate it. And ultimately, it should help you oversee all of your organizational activities and adjust your direction as needed. So if crafted well, that's what it can do. And the level of detail and specificity is going to vary from organization to organization, and this is what you determine through the process. So you can't start this and say I know how much detail I'm going to have from the beginning. It's through going through that process you understand what's going to work best for your organization in moving forward. So here's some common strategic work plan elements. And again, you want to organize these by program area. So the asterisks are the essential areas, which I think are kind of the bare minimum of what you're going to need to have in an effective strategic work plan. Your objectives and milestones are going to be probably the most critical element. So you're going to have your mission, vision, values, goals. You've done your SWOT analysis, and then you have your objectives or your objectives, or in other words, milestones to achieve. They're in alignment with your mission and vision, but they're really achieving the goals that you've identified. I actually think it's beneficial to include and keep track of possible objectives. I'm going to get more to that in a moment as I kind of describe the human element of strategic planning. Another essential element of a strategic work plan is a time frame. Due dates aren't as critical. If you have a time frame, it kind of naturally puts somewhat of a due date. But in the strategic plans that I developed, I typically like to have the objectives listed by year, and it just helps you keep things on track. It helps you understand where you're going. Beyond that, you can have a series of performance metrics. You can have outcomes. There's lots of different ways you can measure the performance in achieving particular objectives and goals. Your outputs and deliverables, what you're actually producing, can be something that you include, or what you're hoping to produce from achieving particular objectives. The financial resources associated with each objective. So as you can see, your objectives are organized by your program areas. Everything else is organized by objectives. So the personnel resources associated with each objective, including the roles and responsibilities. This can be down to the detail of which staff members working on which particular objective, how many work years they're going to be associating with each. Personnel resources can also be partnerships. So there might be a partner, there might be a consultant, there might be a contractor you have working on a particular objective. And then the urgency and status associated with each particular objective can also be included. In terms of developing a strategic plan, I don't know, whether you include and when you include all these things really depends. I think it's essential to start off with the objectives and the time frame. And with that, so by virtue of having objectives, you essentially already have some performance metrics embedded. You either have accomplished the objectives or you haven't. So it may be beneficial to your organization to have some more detailed performance metrics associated with those. It may have more detailed outcomes tracking, but you also need to be careful that you're not adding too much to your strategic work plan, because you don't want to be drawn from actually pursuing and accomplishing goals and objectives to focusing more on actually tracking and measuring your performance and meeting those. So there's a balance there, and I think that's something that can evolve over time. The strategic work plans that I work on are customizable. They're done in Excel, and actually I'm going to demonstrate one for you right now. So let me pull that up. So this is a strategic work plan. I just kind of grabbed one that I've been working on with some tribal organizations. The tribes who are on here may recognize this as an ETEP. Really, an ETEP, an EPA Tribal Environmental Plan, is a strategic work plan. And this is just kind of an example of what this could be. This particular, so as you see on the bottom here, there's several different areas. These are program areas. So there's kind of the media specific. This is education and outreach. And then there's a general category, which actually is a combination of administrative and financial and employee development related stuff. So how you define your program areas and what you put in them is up to you. It's ultimately what works, and it can change over time. You may have it one way for a particular year and find that you want to combine two categories, or you want to break up a category, or just somehow modify it. So, a brief overview of this is, so this is your, the title, description. You could have the program specific long-term goals, and then I organize these by year. And then there's the intermediate objective. This is the crux of it. This isn't relevant to other people, just for the ETEP. Outputs and deliverables. I actually build these spreadsheets in a way that you can run reports and filter pretty easily. So running pivot tables across multiple sheets. So that's why I actually add a program area so that I can filter based on which program areas I want to focus on at a given time. I add categories. Again, this is another thing that just makes the sheet more functional. These are roles. There could be a source of where we got that objective from. I already mentioned the rest. So, your personnel resources, your financial resources, possible funding sources, whether something's recurring or not. So completely customizable. And then, from there, you can actually utilize this. And this, in here, I think it's important to have kind of one line, higher level objectives. So, one example in here is conducting a climate change vulnerability and risk assessment. That's a major activity that involves a series of actions and steps. Those actions and steps are going to be within a work plan that's separate from this. And in this case, it probably will be in a grant proposal work plan. A next major activity would be developing a climate change adaptation plan. So allowing your community to adapt to the changing climate, or how, understanding how you're going to adapt to increased fire risk, how you're going to adapt to increased drought. So, you don't want this to be too cumbersome. So in terms of what level of detail, that's something you may modify over time to make it manageable. And you want this to be manageable at a high level. This is typically going to be a best reference for a director or a program manager in keeping and understanding everything that's going on within the organization. That's something they can look at in 10 to 15 minutes and get a broad overview and know exactly what they're working on within that particular time frame, whether that time frame is a year or whatever you decide for that to be. This is an example of a pivot table that shows how data can be organized. This is a very, very simple pivot table that only actually doesn't do much more than filtering. In this case, I actually can include multiple areas. It's not really showing them because of the screen. So, but anyway, so this organization is this is the objectives, and they're just filtered for the year 2016. So you could actually choose all of your objectives across a given year and show them all at once. And that's good for creating reports that you want to show to other people. And so, can be a very effective, powerful tool that can be customized to meet your needs. And it's something that you could do in Google Docs. Let's say you don't have Excel, you don't have to have the pivot table functions to kind of have a sense of to have a strategic work plan. So after you have your strategic plan, your strategic work plan, then you want to begin implementing it. And this is where creating and maintaining a living strategic work plan comes into play. And your plan is living because it's adaptable to the changing circumstances. And I believe that your living work plan should evolve over time as it's put into practice. The process of implementation also involves utilizing and updating your strategic work plan. So how are you utilizing it to guide your decision-making processes? How are you utilizing it to manage your programs and your employees? I recommend developing a perpetual 4 to 5 year strategic work plan. This really depends on your organization, how much it has going on. This could be a 2 to 3 year plan. I don't think it should be any less than 2 years. I think 4 to 5 is an optimal number. If you're finding that there's just too much detail, then perhaps you need sub-strategic plans for different units or different divisions within your organization, which I do believe that later approach does make a lot of sense. And in fact, you may, if your overall organization does not have a strategic plan, you still should pursue one on your own, and you may actually end up being a catalyst for other departments of the organization, or the organization itself developing a strategic plan. So the other advantage of your department being the only department with a strategic plan is that other departments are probably going to come to you when moving forward with things. You're going to be the only one with a vision and a strategy, and if you collaborate with them in developing your strategic plan, they're actually going to be invested in your strategic plan for your department. So it's going to make your department more effective, but you want to do so in a manner that makes them more effective and accounts for their goals and what may be their goals. So when I say doing a perpetual 4 to 5 year plan, This involves reviewing and update each program area annually, and you can cycle these through on an annual basis. Let's say you have 12 different program areas. You could actually have one per month. If you have 6, you could do one every other month. But I think uh, I believe that it's beneficial to continuously be updating those particular component areas. You want to look at them at least once a year. Um, and having a perpetual one means that it's your 4 to 5 year work plan is always the next 4 to 5 years. So after each year passes, so let's say I have a strategic work plan that's from years 2015 to 2019. It's a 5 year work plan. Uh, so at the end of 2015 during 2015, I'm going to archive 2015, the year that just passed. And then I'm going to add 2020 on the back end, and I'm going to revise everything in between. So I'm going to look at 2015 and look at what I was able to accomplish, archive what I was able to accomplish that I no longer want to pursue. If it's something I haven't accomplished that I'm still working on or still want to pursue, I will integrate it into the future years, maybe the years in between or on the back end. So those years in between are going to be modified based on where you're at, how circumstances have changed, and then at the very back end, you're going to then map out, where does 2019 and 2020 end up going. And then customizing and populating with key information, and you can run reports with that. When you run those reports, what you can do is if you input your funding sources, your employees, the employee resources, how many work years, you run those reports, you actually can identify whether your employees, let's say you have a director position, let's say you have an outreach position. If those positions are, let's say you integrate them associated with all the objectives, and you found that your education outreach coordinator or your marketing professional, they're just one person, and you've essentially with the objectives, you've allocated 2 years to all the activities you're supposed to do in this 1 year. You're going to have to find some way to reallocate those resources to other personnel, or you're going to have to shift some of those objectives to the following year. So you're going to be adjusting this work plan or have the ability to adjust the work plan based on running these reports. And then utilizing and updating the strategic plan is something that's part of the strategic planning process. This is reviewing your mission, vision, values, your SWOT analysis and goals at least annually. And then you may want to do an in-depth review and revision of that overarching strategic plan every 4 to 5 years. Your strategic plan should be an ongoing evaluation tool. So as you consider opportunities, issues, new objectives, you should be evaluating those in the context of your mission, vision, values, and goals. And if they don't align, then either the objectives need to change or those overarching goals and mission, vision, and values need to change. It's important to communicate your strategic plan on an ongoing basis. I'll get more to that in a moment, right here actually. So this is about kind of the process from going from development of your plan to implementing your plan. So there's kind of that bridge of how do you move from one phase to the next. Communication is critical. So communication and training are kind of two critical components of this. So first, communication is you want to communicate the results of the strategic planning development process. You want to communicate the results of the strategic plan to the people involved within your organization, describing how the plans will be implemented and utilized within the organization. So I'm going to talk more about that in a moment, but how is your plan going to be put into practice? What policies and procedures are going to need to be utilized by the people who are going to be utilizing them? How is it going to guide them on a day-to-day basis? When and how will the plans be updated? Will it be annually? Will it be, if you're looking at different program areas, maybe the program areas are being updated on a monthly or quarterly basis? Figuring that out and putting in the processes and procedures for doing it. It's also good to be able to solicit and receive ongoing feedback and input into your strategic work plans. Your employees will be more engaged if they feel like they've uncovered either issues or opportunities, and those things can be addressed in the work plan. You want to communicate the new organizational language. This is the mission, vision, values, and goals. Communicating those initially and then on an ongoing basis so people know what they are so they can remain in alignment. That was one of the top things I said is most people in organizations don't have any idea of what their strategy is. I mean, they may have like a rough sense of it, but you can make sure they know the exact strategy. And then also the strategic planning and management terminology. Even things like goals and objectives, like, make sure everybody's on the same page and using, when they say performance metrics, what does that mean? When they say outcomes, what does that mean? These things mean different things to different people. And then training. You want to train your personnel on how to utilize a strategic plan and work plan. How do they use it for identifying and determining the direction of their program? As a director, how am I going to utilize the plan to direct my staff? How am I going to utilize it to manage the program? How is the plan going to be utilized in the executive decision-making processes? Doing training on how to run the reports, running pivot tables, and then how to build action plans from your strategic work plan. Lastly, how to review and update both your strategic plan and strategic work plan. So I'm getting closer to the end, so I apologize. It's 11 o'clock. I probably have maybe 10 to 15 minutes to go, hopefully less. But if you have to go now, I understand. If not, then I'm happy you're able to stay. This is an important portion of the process. Perhaps the most important portion of the process is the human element. So, how do you get people involved in this? Obtaining your stakeholder input and involvement is critical to the success of strategic planning and implementation, including and especially employees at all levels. And so this is where you're going to create the buy-in and alignment. You want your employees to understand, to have bought in, and to align their actions with a strategic plan. And this doesn't come from just telling them, developing the strategic plan among the top level executives and telling them what it is. It involves getting them engaged in the process of strategic planning, getting their input, getting their buy-in, getting their perspective. And through that, you're going to foster a sense of respect for them that's going to make them feel more valued as a participant and as an employee, and a sense of belonging into something perhaps greater than themselves. Provides a container for new ideas and concerns. So something that happens with a lot of organizations is there is no kind of set processes for identifying and evaluating new opportunities, concerns, objectives. So, and then typically they come from either the most powerful or the most vocal person. And somebody who's, maybe less powerful or less vocal, maybe more of an introvert than an extrovert, they may express an idea from time to time, and then if it wasn't systematically acted upon, and they find that it really just ends up being the person who's the loudest or the most influential, that those are the only things that get acted upon, then they're going to probably stop presenting new ideas and concerns, which is going to be a detriment to your organization. So you want to have a clear and consistent process for evaluating these new ideas. When anybody has an idea, if they know that there's going to be a clear and consistent process for capturing that idea, documenting it, and evaluating it, then they're going to feel more respected and valued. And it's going to be something where it's not an interpersonal issue. It's not that, oh, well, Jane gets all, she says these things, and the organization continues to shift every time she has an idea, but I come up with something and nobody respects or listens to me. Doesn't mean that you act upon every single idea. It's just a consistent process for evaluating. It's a place to put them, and then if somebody's idea isn't acted upon, you can let them know, it's clear why it was not acted upon. That's an ongoing communication process, but it helps make that process easier. So, and when you do have that process, you want it to be in the context, that evaluation should be in the context of the mission, vision, values, goals, and other objectives. Communicating and modeling commitment to your mission, vision, and values, that is critically important. I said this before, so I'm not going to say it again in too much detail. If you're not acting in alignment with your mission, vision, and values, there's going to be dissonance. It's going to be detrimental to your society. It's going to breed a negative culture. On the flip side of it, you can create a sense of meaning and purpose, and maybe even inspire the people who are part of it. Not just employees, but stakeholders, board members, even the people you're serving. Clarifying direction expectations is, if you don't want employees who are like, just tell me what I have to do and I'll do it. You're not getting the most out of your employees if that's what their default is, and that's the default probably in most organizations. Through an effective strategic planning process, strategic plan development, implementation processes, the direction and expectations are clear. The goals, the objectives, the performance metrics, everything is more clear, and it'll continue to get more clear over time, and it'll be adaptable as circumstances change. It also, this process includes the people. It helps develop a relationship, and it helps address interpersonal matters. So actually, what I meant to say about this part is you want to incorporate these things into your strategic plan. So you want to incorporate the human element. You want to incorporate objectives associated with relationship building and interpersonal matters, both positive and negative. Those should be integrated within the values, within the goals, within the objectives, perhaps even the mission and in the vision. So employee training, employee development, interdepartmental relations, those things like that, communication strategies, your internal stuff should be incorporated into your strategic plan. Advanced strategic planning and management these are just other things that can be done. That this is really going into more depth. A lot of things that have already been covered. So I'm not gonna talk about these. You can probably learn more about these and some of the resources I'm going to provide. So getting close to the end, I want to kind of demonstrate strategic planning with a visually with a few more kind of graphics. So these are potential strategic planning pathways. So this blue dot represents an organization, and this organization has no strategic plan. So this organization starts at A, and really the goal of this is kind of talk about strategic planning with respect to resources being utilized. So this organization with strategic plan is starting at A, and this is the path of this organization. It's bouncing all over the place. New opportunities are presented to it, new funding opportunities new partnerships, a board member comes up with a new idea. So they're going all over the place. There's not really any clear way that it's going. It's kind of just reacting to arbitrary things, perhaps arbitrary things, things that may seem very logical, but are actually somewhat seemingly arbitrary to an outsider. And it ends up at X. X doesn't really mean anything. X isn't a mission. It's not a vision. It's not a specific goal. It's just where it's at after a certain amount of time. This is the path that organization took. It actually kind of moved this way. It could have ended up over here. There's really no rhyme or reason to where this organization went. And I actually measured these lines in Google Earth, and so this organization went 1,200, in this case, I think it was feet or something like that on Google Earth, but 1,200 units of a particular resource. So I put insert resource here. This resource could be time, it could be money, it could be personnel, it could, there's lots of different resources and a combination of resources that could have been expended to the organization from A to X. And who knows that, why is X even better than A? Without a purpose, without a mission, without a vision, it's unclear. So this organization has a strategic plan. It's starting at A, but through the strategic planning process, it has identified a goal, which is B. That goal flows down from its mission and its vision. So this is the path that this organization takes. Things happen, opportunities get presented, issues and challenges occur. So it kind of goes up and down. It gets, let's say that the straight line is the exact alignment. So you're not always going to be in perfect alignment, but this is the path that an organization with a strategic plan takes. And during this course of time, this organization got twice as far and expended 800 units of resources versus 1,200 units of resources. So the last example is an organization that has a living strategic plan. Starting at A, it's identified its a goal of B, and it's going through this process, kind of the same exact pattern as before. So that's where it ended up halfway during this particular process. So after a year, it does a review of that particular goal. It reevaluates it and reflects and revises its strategic work plan based on changing circumstances, and it's actually identified that the goal needs to change. So the goal is now C instead of B. In this organization, so C is close to B because if the organization did effective strategic planning, new goals aren't going to be, in a completely different ballpark. C is not going to be on the other side of A. They've already considered these things in detail. So the consideration now is just like, some outside forces have changed they've identified through the SWOT analysis. So, instead of going right here, it's just a little bit different. So this is the new path the organization takes. Instead of going toward B, it goes towards C. And in this case, it only expended a little bit more units of resource, but C is really where it wants to go, not B, and it's identified that now. So this organization is in alignment. It's utilized less resources and more effectively gotten to where it wants to go. And this can be mapped out for lines and lines and lines. So that could be, you could go to A to Z, and there's all sorts of decision points, all sorts of review points. This is how an organization that's in alignment, this is the path it should take. And over time, these peaks and valleys may actually lessen. But I do believe that you'll have changing goals. You should. The world changes, and you want your goals, your mission and vision to continue to reflect reality as those change. So how can Prosper help with this? So I want to share what Prosper can do to work with you during this process. So Prosper can gather, organize, and analyze and communicate the information that you have that's relevant to the strategic planning process. This includes document review. You may have a strategic plan already that needs to be reviewed. There may be other plans that are relevant to that. There's all sorts of documents. It really varies from organization to organization. So I would help you identify those organizations. I would review all those. I would organize them, analyze it, and then communicate the organized results and analysis to you based on the input of what you've identified as being most important. Another way to gather information is through strategic planning retreat. That isn't an end-all be-all to the strategic planning process. That is a stage of it, but I think that should extend beyond it through questionnaires, interviews, surveys, meetings. To what extent you do these things, it's perhaps going to depend on what your budget is, how much you internalize these things, and I can work with you to administer and gather this information, or do it on your behalf. I'm going to help your organization prepare. I can help your organization prepare a strategic plan framework. So identifying from that information, help you clarify what should be the program areas, how should you organize this, how should you structure a strategic work plan, and then even drafting the plan based on the input from within the organization. So taking that organized information and putting it into that plan, so that you have that. It's difficult. Somebody working in the organization, it's difficult for you to take time away from your day-to-day activities to spend the time doing this. It's critical, and it should be done somehow, some way. So, it's that will save you time having somebody else be able to draft it. I can develop and implement the strategic management plan. So this is a collaborative process. Obviously, all these things are collaborative processes. I can't do these alone. Developing and implementing a strategic management system is going to be something that's going to necessarily involve minimum the highest level employees, if not employees throughout the entire organization. Providing periodic support as needed. So for those annual updates, being able to work with you on revising your strategic plan, and especially your strategic work plan, on an annual basis or whatever period of time that you want to revise it. And my goal is to help you be self-sufficient. So I want you to be self-sufficient. I want you, you may have me come in and work with you to revise it once or twice, and you're like, we got it now, we can do it on our own. Thanks for the guidance. If that happens, I was successful. If I was but circumstances may change down the road, and you want some other support. Through this process, I can guide your organization, keep you on track, keep you moving forward. As I mentioned, strategic planning, it's, I think, probably one of the most important things you can be doing, but it's never a priority activity. It's not a fire. It can help create less fires, but it can be hard to, if you've been in the kind of high priority, firefighting mentality your whole career, or your organization, that's the organization's culture, it can be hard for you to find the time to step back and do this. So I can keep you moving forward on this. I can do a lot of the work for you, keep you on track while keeping you, this is really your process. You're going to be involved. I'm just facilitating. Prosper also offers a fresh, independent, and insightful perspective. So the ability to get new ideas and options, identify resources and opportunities is invaluable. Really, I think the best metaphor for this is having somebody who isn't isn't stuck within the forest, can't see see through the forest. I just butchered that particular metaphor. So basically, I can see from an outside perspective. I'm not within the forest. I can see the whole forest and the trees, and just see things in a unique way. Also really good at identifying collaborative opportunities, funding opportunities, other resources. It just and Another thing too is identifying and addressing issues and challenges. I'm very good in within this process. There's going to be interpersonal challenges. There's going to be uh, cultural issues and things like that that can be difficult either to identify or manage if you are within that organization. So having somebody who is outside the organization not only to identify it, but who may also be detached from it. And if you had to deal with an issue directly with somebody else who you don't work well with, that can be challenging. But to have a third party come in with those skills and experience can actually be very beneficial to having everybody move forward. So this is the second to last slide. On top of that, Prosper Sustainably offers other services. So strategic planning for me is a collaborative process. So that's why Prosper offers collaborative strategic planning and management. What we just went through was organizational strategy. So collaborative organizational strategy. As I mentioned in the beginning, these same things apply to an individual strategy. So I also offer collaborative individual strategy services that it's, I guess in other words, coaching. I don't like that word at all. But working with you on your own personal and professional strategies to get where you want to go with your life. Prosper does grants writing and grants management. I'm very successful with that with the Chumash and beyond. Program management and project development, or vice versa. Feasibility studies, new venture planning, which is business planning that could be market analyses. A wide variety of environmental sustainability services. So things like evaluating your organization for environmental sustainability or energy sustainability, so in developing a plan, a cost-effective plan to utilize your resources most effectively. So, and there's other environmental services even related to NEPA and CEQA, and then doing writing, speaking, and training associated with all these. So, and environmental services apply to the other above more general services as well. And you can find those at prospersustainably.com/services. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I don't see any additional questions. So as I mentioned, there's going to be a post-webinar survey. You'll be redirected to it upon conclusion. Your feedback is very much appreciated. I always want to improve and identify other areas that I can help offer trainings and services. If there's no more questions, thank you for your time. I hope this helps you at least as a catalyst to get you thinking about and engaged in the strategic planning processes. If you are interested in working with me on that, feel free to give me a call or send me an email, and you will receive an email when these resources are posted online. So thank you very much. And give me one moment. I'm going to close the application.